Here's something I want to say about the papers, folk. Once again, for those of you who didn't hear this last week, I'll remind you, the whole thing was directed toward one question: can the United States be conquered? All of the other 7 of the things I wanted you to write about was leading up to that one issue. Now, I want to tell you something I don't think most of you know. There is a serious weakness in this world today that only a few people are aware of, and that is we are using microprocessors. All it would take is a spike in the voltage that can be caused, there's a spike run over the wires. Now, what's a spike? Well, let's say you have 120 volts, and all of a sudden something happens that causes the voltage to go for just one cycle, boom, maybe to 1,000 volts in one cycle. The electric motors wouldn't be affected, but every solid-state device that's plugged in right then could be wiped out. Now, okay, you might say, well, that's wired. But now, there's 2 types of ways that a spike could hit us going under the radio waves. Number 1 is a solar flare. We had a solar flare, the sun flared up recently, it missed the Earth. The side of the Earth that's facing the sun when a flare hits could have all of its solid-state devices wiped out. Or a nation like a rogue country like North Korea or Iran, or even Russia or China, could send a nuclear blast that would not even hit us, but it would send a spike. I'm going to call it a spike for lack of a better word. That would put 10,000 volts of radio wave for just one little cycle, and it would wipe out every solid state device. Do you realize the sheer awfulness of what would happen? Without solid state, all of our computers would be dysfunctional. All of our communications would be wiped out. Our weapon. Okay, if you had, how many have ever heard of this outside the class?
I have, because I know, and only because I work with law enforcement, I know this.
Oh, you know this.
They have vehicles. We have vehicles and certain equipment
That can cover shield you. Well, good, yeah.
Or it doesn't have to operate on that. Or operate,
well,
yeah.
Hopefully my ham rig is pretty well shielded and grounded, but you've got anything that's under a couple of inches of metal.
Yeah.
Will be protected. So they're working on that.
It's always been in place. I don't know if they didn't want it. They don't like to spread fear.
Okay, well, but people are talking about it.
Yeah, and I know, like in Cherokee County, there's a lot of people who live there, and you see they have bunkers, they have all this stuff, and some people think that they're crazy, but they believe along the lines of what you're believing, and they were believing this way back, and I'm talking about the early 2000s. They were into this, like, the spike you're talking about.
Now, what group do you talk about?
All these people I know have been in Cherokee County, like
Church?
No, these are just residents that I.
Oh, residents, the people you know about.
I would come across, and they would like come and they would like show you their bunker and show you how they're preparing for.
The reason I don't have one is I can't afford one.
They were preparing for stuff like what you're saying.
Yeah.
And when you listen to it, you go, oh, man, that's a bit much. But then you live a little longer, you start to see certain things that now, like we're talking about, like no offense to. With the presidency we have now, or the way the government is going now, they thought this through back when I came up.
In 1983, they put out a movie about the day that there was a nuclear blast, so we had a nuclear war, and it talked about it. A man tried to start his motorcycle, but it wouldn't start. People tried to start their cars, and it wouldn't start.
Yeah.
That was 1983. I forget the name of the movie, but it was a really popular movie. I watched part of it, didn't watch it all. But anyway, if that were to happen to us, folk, we might wish that we had done a lot of change. Now, see, think about it, this type of thing I'm talking about would not affect human beings, the human body. It does not affect the bodies of animals, plants, insects, or whatever.
Our ability to communicate each other, to rally, to defend. You got us all scattered like that, and you can pick us all off instead of us uniting together and being able to effectively communicate via radio, via phone, there's a lot of now.
That would be the big drawback.
Right.
They knock out our equipment.
Yeah.
That would be the big drawback. And they asked Douglas MacArthur one time, "What do you think World War IV will be fought with?" He said, "Sticks and stones." If that be the case, folk, hey, I really believe that humanity has gone downhill before. The pyramids of Egypt is proof of it. I've been told that we, with our technology, could not build the pyramids. You've heard that too, yet. That the people who built them had more, they knew more than we do. They were smarter. We dig up skeletons and find that those people could do brain surgery, and it looks like their brain surgeons were better than ours. They had better medicine than we do. They had better equipment, better machinery than we do. And yes, there were stories of them flying to other planets. We look on it being myths and fairy tales. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because also the connection with the Mayans as well, with the pyramids, they have some type of connection with both of them.
There was something, that fascination the ancients had for the pyramids. The pyramid is found all over the world. China has them. India has them. They're found in places that are now kind of grown over and covered up.
Yep.
The Mayans had them. The Egyptians, of course, had 100 of them. And the Vedas talk about traveling to other planets. This, the Rig Veda particularly. This you can look up. So where did all this go? Well, they lost it somewhere along the way and couldn't get it back. So it's happened before. All right. Getting back to the time period now. One of the Supreme Court decisions favored the accused. It's called the Miranda rights. If a person was arrested illegally, the law required he be turned loose. For instance, if the government had wiretapped a person's phone conversations, or had planted microphones and tape recording devices into a room and listened in on a private conversation, which the government was prone to do at that time, they would go into a person's home when he wasn't there and plant wiretaps. Now, this was what Nixon did in 1972, by the way. But to go into the Watergate Hotel and put wiretaps and microphones. But they'd go in and plant wiretaps and listen in on their conversations. Well, the Supreme Court ruled that any evidence collected by this way would guarantee that the accused would be declared not guilty and thrown out of court. Also, there's the famous decision, the Miranda decision, where that the cops had to say, you have the right to remain silent. Every time they arrested someone, you have the right to remain silent, you've had the advice of counsel, and anything you say can be held against you in court of law. Now, this is no longer required, I understand.
Yeah, no.
But it was until just a few short, well, maybe 10 years or so ago. For many, many years, cops were reciting the rights to the accused. The accused were given all kinds of favors, and many a person who we knew were guilty were turned loose because the police had used illegal means to arrest them. Yes?
I remember, when I got into it, you didn't have to. The only time you recited Miranda is when you're doing a DUI.
Oh.
You would read them there, you would have a card. And you would have to
It changed from time to time.
Yeah, you would have to stand in front, because your patrol car has a camera on
Yeah.
it, and you would stand and have the accused stand in front of the car, and you would have to read their Miranda rights to them.
Yeah.
And whether they consent or not, if you can show that people are quite.
That you had read them, then you could.
Right.
They didn't know that.
They.
Yeah. Now, one thing that happened, crime got worse and worse. And in 1969, there came the infamous Sharon Tate murders, where Sharon Tate was a highly attractive Hollywood movie actress. Some people broke into her home one day. She was pregnant, and she said, "Please spare my baby. Please spare me. They killed her, and of course the baby died also. She was late in her pregnancy.
Is that Charles Manson?
That was Charles Manson. Now, and finally, people woke up and said, hey, the victims have rights also. To make a long story short, Charles Manson and his entire gang who did the crime was put in prison. And from that day till this, not one of Charles Manson's gang has ever been released. Charles Manson himself died of old age just recently in prison.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, he died he died about 2 or 3 years ago. I forget what his illness, but basically it was old age. He was in his early 80s. But he died, and everyone who took part in the murders has remained in prison to this day. Again, letting people know that victims have rights too. But this is something that's not in your book, but something I thought I'd throw in. But the Supreme Court decisions seem to favor the accused and handcuff the police, with the result that crime seems to have gotten worse. It was one of the, I'm not even going to write the man's name down here. I may not dislike him so much. His name was Earl Warren, the Chief Justice. And there came movements by the far right to impeach Earl Warren. Eventually the court became more conservative as time went on. Eisenhower said when I appointed Earl Warren, it was the biggest mistake I ever made. And I asked Ike in later years, did you ever make a mistake? Yeah, I made 2 mistakes. There were Warren and Brennan and Warren together. Brennan lasted a long time. Warren, for whatever reason, finally retired from the Supreme Court. Now, one of the more controversial, one of the more controversial decisions the Supreme Court made was Roe v. Wade, and this should be put in italics, folk, not regular print, because the Supreme Court, the court decisions are supposed to be italicized. Anyway, Roe v. Wade legalized abortion. Now, folk, I've read conflicting accounts of what Roe v. Wade actually originally said. I believe it was originally said that abortion was legal only in the first 3 months of pregnancy. It was called the first trimester. Pregnancies come in trimesters, 3 months, 6 months, and then 9 months. But the original Roe v. Wade decision, as I understand it, now if any of you know differently, you're welcome to say so, it only applied to the first 3 months of a pregnancy. But what it became was that a woman could have an abortion anytime she chose, at any point. And now lately, they've even gotten to where that a woman can abort her baby after it's born if she chooses. Infanticide, that the Japanese have made legal from the very beginning. And again, this takes us back to Roman times, where the Greeks and Roman people would abort their babies after they were born, or take them out and expose them to the wild. The result has been 1 out of every 3 to 1 out of every 4 pregnancies end in abortion in this country. In some cases, as high as 40% in some places of the pregnancies end in abortion. And folk, let me tell you something. About 54 years ago, I did my first term paper. The title was, Is American Society Following in the Footsteps of the Roman Empire? The Romans killed their babies, mostly after they were born. If they didn't want the baby, they just simply, but also they practiced abortion. A lot of Roman women, if they became pregnant, they didn't want to disfigure themselves, so they'd abort the baby right away. Yes, they had that technique even then. With the result was the Roman population went from 50 million, you don't have to write this down, to 30 million. In 300 years' time, I say, well, why is that so drastic? Because when the Roman population got down to here, until the Hun came in from Central Asia, oh my. In addition, the Germans at the same time moved in. If the Romans had had all the babies they killed, their population would have been at least 200 million. And guess what? Attila the Hun would not have done it. Attila the Hun was a coward. He would take advantage of you if he were bigger than you were, but if he thought you were his size, he'd run. He proved that at least. In fact, once when he was about to be defeated, he was about to commit suicide, but the Roman general had used the Germans to beat him. Then they wanted to use him to help beat the Germans, because they knew that Rome could not handle either Attila or the Germans because of the big decrease in population. The point I'm making is we are going to miss those babies. 2 reasons. When you people get older and start collecting Social Security, there'll be none. This is serious, folk. Old people have always been supported by their children, younger people. When the younger people no longer exist, the old people are going to not be supported, pure and simple. Number 1. And number 2, when we fight the next big war with a big enemy, like I say, we're going to miss all these people that we have aborted. This is something you won't hear very many people say. I mean, what's so bad about abortion? It will eventually lead to the society that practices being conquered and enslaved and destroyed. The Roman civilization went from a justice system where the accused had a right to face his accusers, to a justice system of where walk on this bed of hot coals, and if your feet heal fast, you're innocent. If your feet don't heal fast, you're guilty. This is in your history book. Every history book I've seen has it. Or lie on a bed of spikes. If the spikes break your skin, you're guilty. If the spikes don't break your skin, you're innocent. This is in the books, folk. It's in the one that this school has used since I've taught here. It was in the books, the history books if you've studied world history, you've read it. That is where America, that's where Europe went. They went from a high level of justice, and it took generations for Europe to climb itself out of the Dark Ages, to pull itself up by its own bootstraps. That's where it did. Why? Because foreigners, and that's why foreigners, barbarians, took over. Now, this girl told me there's a Chinese student next door, and I asked her about it before at the end of last class. Do you recall studying history where that foreign barbarians destroyed the Chinese civilization at least 3 times in China's long history? Yes, they did. In India, foreign barbarians destroyed the civilization of India at least once. What's the point I'm making? A lot of you people believe that we should build bridges and allow anybody at all to just come in and walk into the country with no restraints. Now, I want to tell you something else. I mean, if you believe, when my great-great-grandfather, all right, we're a nation of immigrants. I can trace my genealogy to many immigrant ancestors. When my great-great-grandfather, named John Cunningham, came over here in 1845, there was no welfare system. He knew that the people of this country was not going to feed him, clothe him, or house him, or support him. Why do I bring that up? Because today these immigrants are expecting our welfare system to feed, to clothe, and house, and give them medical care, which was not going on in the 1840s, or even the 1720s and 30s, when some other ancestors who fought in the Revolutionary War, served under George Washington, when they came over, there was no government welfare system. But Europe is finding out the hard way. They let these people in, they produce and contribute nothing, but they leech off the welfare system, and it's bringing their economies crashing down. And Finland, which supposedly is the #1 nation in the world, the best country that has the highest rate of attacks on women, second highest. The highest is Sweden, the neighbor next door. Sweden is #1, and Finland, I believe, is a close second. Some of you think I've heard this from other sources. Yeah, at least one of you, 2 of you nodding your head. You have heard them. The reason I asked some of you not just so that the rest of you know, I'm not making this up, folk. This you can find out with a little bit of research. And to think the liberals that promote women's rights, the people that they want to let in violate women worse than the people who are living here already do. All right. Again, back to your papers. All right.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Like I had stated when you talk about the paper, when you say food stamps, I remember I used to work with HUD in the government. It was never designed for long-term use. It was like a 3-year plan that you had to be on if you were a family. But the only thing it was designed, it was almost to separate the family, because the father who lived in the house with the wife, he was encouraged, or even was forced out, because here they would say, hey, listen, you're a working body, so if you want to receive public assistance, you would have to leave your family, apply yourself, and then she would have to apply for food stamps, and then turn around, then the social services will sue him to pay back the money, or he would have to sign an agreement that he would pay back the money that was so-called loan to him with no interest.
I've heard these.
But he was only allowed to build it for 3 to 5 years. But then it turned into something ugly where, all that process went out the window. So now you have people abusing the system.
Well, see, here's what there was a court decision, because, see, to make sure there was no man in the house, a government aide had to knock on a door.
Right.
Well, then they said, this is illegal. We just can't have people knocking on the doors of private homes to determine whether or not there's a man in the house. So, but here's the point I'm making. I mean, I'm going to try to make here. What the Supreme Court intended to do in 1973 with the Indian Roe v. Wade is not what wound up happening.
Right.
And once more, what the Supreme Court intended to do was that by protecting people from having to listen to something they don't believe in, a Christian Bible or whatever, to protect them, wound up creating issues that they never anticipated. Folks, again, you can't make a change without having some kind of an undesirable side effect that you didn't anticipate. And food stamps today, I've been told now, are now used to buy large screen TVs, cell phones, and whatever else. And like one of you, or maybe there's another clap, put on your paper, people in poverty, everyone in the family has a cell phone, and they have this big widescreen TV in their living room, and sometimes two of them at home, and yet they're drawing money from the government, and they're making more money than they would make if the parents worked at McDonald's full time. This was not the intent, but this is where it's a path. You take a certain path and not knowing where it leads, and you wind up at a place you don't want to be. Or a road. You take this road thinking you lead to one place and it winds up leading to another. You think all the world's problems will be solved if we just simply take money. And folk, I have to refer back because I spent hours, and I wrote comments on all your papers. I spent hours looking at your papers. I'm surprised at how many of you people believe that the rich have more money than they need, and the rich should be willing to share their money with the poor, or the government should take this money from the rich and give it to the poor. I'd be surprised how many of you believe that, folk. And folk, that's what the American Indians did. And they wound up being conquered and their land taken away from them. All these 8 questions were designed to that one thing. Will it lead to our downfall? Folk, I believe I said to this class, Robin Hood, if he existed at all, it was said he robbed the rich to feed the poor. Robin Hood would have done society more benefit if he had robbed the poor and given what little they had to the rich. The poor would have benefited, and so would the rich. So would everybody have. If you feel uncomfortable, well, I've said, hey, I feel uncomfortable saying it because I know a lot of you don't like it. And I don't like it either.
I don't think we should redistribute like the wealth like that.
I don't think we have.
I think as far as taxes, as I'm concerned, I don't think that the major corporations should get tax breaks, because I think that's where, as it is, society is time has shown, and this to be the fact, when you tax people the appropriate way, it generates jobs, money.
It does, yes.
So if the economy,
that's in your book,
right? And it's right. It shows. History has shown when you tax properly, and then it does eliminate the so-called middle class, because now the wealth, people have jobs and different things of that nature. But when you start talking about taking people's hard-earned money and just saying, "Hey, look, you have too much now," and let me give it to this guy who who doesn't know how to fish. So if you give somebody a millionaire, you're just going to highlight their problems. Money just is a highlighter.
Ooh.
You don't think about it. It just highlights the problems that they already don't have without money. And that's shown right now for people who hit the lottery. They're broke within 2 years after hitting
It ruins their lives.
$230 million in 2 years.
It ruins the lives of most people who win it.
Yeah.
And they're now saying that, well, do you want to take this in distributions over a period of several years? But they're going to lose it as they get it.
Yeah.
Again, there are some people who know how to earn it and handle it, and some of us don't. And I want to tell you, I'm one of the ones who don't, so I'm better off with that. Anyway, all right. Johnson's popularity started out really high, and he won the election in 1964 by a landslide. And I remember in 1964 we had a big assembly where some high school seniors who favored Goldwater were allowed to speak, and one favored Johnson. The student body just booed the Goldwater people. But I had some classmates. Some of my high school people were for Goldwater. Yes, there were some Goldwaterites. But Goldwater lost badly. But there was a difference, though. Goldwater, a Republican, carried the South. And this was a change. And most of the time from that day till this, the South has been mostly Republican instead of Democrat. But for many years after the Civil War, the South was mostly Democrat. But then it changed. All right. Some of your names I have circled already, but if you pass this around, and Yeah, I've circled your name. Those of you who are here, circle your names. All right. Johnson's popularity went down largely as a result of the Vietnam War and as a result of the rioting. I remember I was a freshman in college when Johnson announced that he would not run again. Now, he had not served half of Kennedy's term. He had only served about 15 months or so of Kennedy's first term, and then he'd been elected in his own right, so he was eligible to run for a second term. He declined, and if he would have run, he would not have won. Now, during the during the campaign of 1968, Robert Kennedy made a bid for the White House. Now, Robert Kennedy was the brother of John F., but Robert Kennedy had a problem that John F. didn't have. My high school civics teacher put it this way: Robert Kennedy was a man either you liked or you didn't. A lot of people did not like him. He did not have his brother's charisma, charm, call it what you will. He did not have his brother's personality.
He's more like his daddy.
Perhaps so. Cold, but nevertheless, he started running for president to defeat Johnson's vice president, Hubert H. Humphrey. But in June, right after winning the California primary, Robert Kennedy was shot dead by a Palestinian.
Do you think you'd have won if he would have?
Okay, that's a big, big if. The experts say he couldn't have done it. He got in the race too late, number one. Number two, the Democrats had a way of controlling the delegates, which they're not doing this time. But the last election, they had these what they call super delegates, where every Democratic congressman and senator would be a delegate, and they had it stacked and rigged in favor of Hillary Clinton. I mean, I'll just spell it out. They spelled it out in favor of Hillary Clinton. Does everybody circle their name in the picture? Okay. The experts said he would not have. However, a lot of people, if you talk to, they say he would have. The book gives the reason was because of his support for Israel. That probably was. I mean, his support for Israel would get him a lot of votes. In fact, in the 1960s, let's see, one of the campaigns where he'd run for Senate or something, he did not express such support for Israel, with the result that he lost a lot of votes, but he wanted to carry the Jewish vote. Again, this is one of the riddles we'll never be able to answer. Would he have pulled it off? The experts say no. In the campaign of 1968, a third party entered, Governor Wallace of Alabama, an open racist. Now, later on, Governor Wallace changed his mind.
Yeah, he did.
All these Southern politicians, as Northerners moved in and as more and more blacks got the right to vote, Governor Wallace tried to make up to the black people, but he ran in 1968.
Is this when wasn't he confined to a wheelchair?
He ran in 1972. He carried several southern states in 1968, though, and that the Democrats wish they would have carried. In 1972, he was shot and paralyzed and for life and confined to a wheelchair for the rest of life. The man's name who shot him was Artie Grimmer. Grimmer was finally released from prison, after 30 years.
Did he ever say why he shot him?
Okay, Brimmer was a nutcase. He got a job as a high school custodian, and he developed a crush on some pretty girl in the high school, and she went out with him a couple of times. Then she said, "Phooey on you," and rejected him, and he was hurt. So to take out his frustrations, he just went out and bought him a gun and shot somebody. Basically, that was what they said did it. It was not communism. It was not race. It was just simply. It was not because of race. It was just simply some man wanted to shoot somebody who was hurt. He was brokenhearted, basically. But anyways, Bremer stayed in prison for 30 years. The government is getting to where more and more releases these men as they